You might know McDonald's as the fast food chain that sells hamburgers and fries, but by the end of this video, you'll understand that it goes way deeper than that. That's why this week on Business Explored, we'll be looking at the world's second largest restaurant chain, McDonald's. McDonald's was founded by two brothers from New Hampshire, Richard and Maurice McDonald. In the 1920s, they moved to California, where they opened a movie theater and a hot dog stand. Unfortunately for the brothers, this was shortly followed by the historic Great Depression. The businesses struggled during this time and eventually went bust. This did not deter the brothers as they kept searching for new business opportunities in the following years. Perseverance eventually rewarded the brothers with their first big success coming in 1940, when they opened a barbecue joint in San Bernardino. Now, at the time, virtually all restaurants were either small, family-owned, or independent business establishments with their own unique taste and cooking methods. Drive-ins with roller skating waitresses were all the rage back then, but they weren't particularly efficient. You had to wait half an hour to get your order, and half of the time they got it wrong. The McDonald's barbecue was no different, and although it did make a profit, the brothers knew they could do better. They realized that most of their income was coming from just three products: hamburgers, french fries, and Coke. And after running the business for 8 years, the brothers decided to make a radical makeover. They dropped most of their menu to focus on their best sellers, and then they redesigned the entire kitchen around them. The cooking process started to look like an assembly line, which allowed the brothers to complete customer orders in as little as 30 seconds. They abandoned the drive-in concept in favor of a walk-up counter, and they stopped using cutlery and dishes entirely, replacing them with disposable paper packaging. In an instant, their restaurant became a sensation, drawing in attention from across the country. One of the people they attracted was Ray Kroc, a then milkshake machine seller. Ray was a natural-born hustler who allegedly, at the age of 15, lied his way into serving as a Red Cross ambulance driver during World War I. Interestingly enough, he served alongside Walt Disney in France, but they didn't keep in touch after the war. One day in 1954, Ray received an order for 8 milkshake machines from none other than the McDonald brothers. Milkshakes were proving to be a popular choice among McDonald customers. Ray made his way to San Bernardino to fulfill the order. However, when he arrived, he completely fell in love with their restaurant and immediately offered to franchise it. By that point, the McDonald brothers had already opened over 20 franchise locations, but none of them was doing as well as the original restaurant. The lack of oversight made maintaining quality impossible. The brothers decided to give Ray a shot, and boy, did he deliver. He handpicked only the best franchisees and ran his operations like an army drill. In just 6 years, Ray built 100 McDonald's restaurants, with little help from the McDonald brothers. Ray eventually grew tired of them. They'd reap 0.5% of all sales for doing nothing, while roadblocking Ray's suggestions for innovation and improvements. Ray decided that he needed to find a way to cut them out and devised a brilliant strategy. He'd buy the land all future restaurants would be built upon, and then he'd lease it to his franchisees. This meant Ray got to retain almost all the company income, whilst leaving the McDonald brothers empty-handed. The brothers were not too pleased about it, of course, but there was nothing they could do. So they eventually decided in 1961 to sell their franchise to Ray for $2.7 million. Ray stepped onto the elevator with the brothers out of the way, making all the improvements he had always desired, including redesigning the logo and creating a mascot. He also broadened the selection, introducing the filet-o fish in 1965 and the Big Mac in 1968. Ray announced opening store number 1000 the same year and introduced the new version of the Golden Arches design. McDonald's would continue to expand over the next decades, and not only throughout the US. In 1972, they invented fast food breakfast with the launch of the Egg McMuffin. It also introduced products such as Chicken McNuggets and the Happy Meal, which would ultimately make them the biggest seller of toys in the country. By 1988, they had 10,000 restaurants, and even though Ray was no longer around, without him the business continued to grow. The McDonald's chain has some of the best trained managers in the fast food business due to their famous Hamburger University. It allowed them to remain one step ahead of rivals such as Burger King and Wendy. McDonald's have since proceeded to broaden their selection into something we know today. In 2006, the chain undertook its first significant renovation since the 1970s, embracing the so-called Forever Young style, including luxurious sofas and armchairs in dining zones. Surprisingly enough, McDonald's is not the biggest food company in the country today. The honor belongs to Subway, which has more than 42,000 stores, opposed to more than 38,000 for McDonald's. Just 15% of them belong to the organization itself, the majority are held by franchisees. McDonald's has easily recognized that there's a lot more money to be made collecting rent passively compared to the expense of operating their own restaurants. In 2014, for example, business-operated stores produced $18.2 billion, yet McDonald's kept just $2.9 billion of it. In contrast, the organization kept $7.6 billion of the $9.2 billion coming from franchisees, a remarkable 80%. Thus, although McDonald's seems to be flipping burgers, they are simply playing Monopoly instead. Thanks for watching. If you like the history of McDonald's, feel free to subscribe for more and to check out the full Business Explored playlist for more interesting stories.